Hey everyone, this is Kim O'Neill from the Every Day's a New Day podcast and live show, and you're listening to the Going North podcast with the hilarious Dom Brightman. Be sure to subscribe to his show so you don't miss any episodes, and remember, every day is always a new day.
And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as the Going North podcast, we have another returning guest in the building, baby. One of the top guests from 2019 is back in the building. He's alive, well, and kicking lots of butt, baby, kicking lots of butt. And that's not just because he's a financial black belt and a martial arts black belt. It's because this fabulous human right here is still alive and well, who's been basically educating the world about finances, because we all need financial education, because this guy right here is an author, educator, strategist, as well as a veteran from the U.S. Army, and he's right here in the good old state, the Queen Anne state itself, Maryland. So let's give it up for Mr. KR himself. Welcome back, Ken. Rupert, how you doing today, Ken?
Mr. Don, I can't complain. You know, it's been a challenging year, but you know what? Within that challenge has been a ton of opportunity. And so I'm really excited about, kind of stepping into this new year with some nuggets of wisdom that maybe will bring some encouragement to your listeners and maybe even, enlighten a few people to a way of thinking differently about the challenges that we're facing and the opportunities that exist there.
That's what I'm talking about, because 2020 was crazy. It's like we had COVID, then we had Tiger King, and then we had some stimulus checks while the Tiger King was on TV to distract some people. Then some more nonsense from folks in uniform and folks who are in uniform are mad at the folks who screwed it up for the good guys and all sorts of other nonsense going on. But hey, my goodness, how have you been?
I've been doing good. It's very interesting because one of the things I always talk about is being prepared. It's not just a Boy Scout saying, right? If you prep yourself and you put yourself in a position, I always say, position yourself for success. Even when challenging times come by, you can find success. The key is to be able to look beyond the risks and find the opportunities. And then, one of the things that we learn in martial arts is that you always neutralize the threat, and then you seize on the opportunity of offense, right? So if somebody throws a punch, the idea is to neutralize that threat and then strike back. That's the way martial arts is trained. Financial martial arts is exactly the same way, right? We have to identify our financial threats, and we have to neutralize them before they cause us any kind of pain. And so that's all about positioning and priority and these kinds of things. And so even in the midst of some very challenging times, and before this year, before COVID hit and everything, in 2018, I went through 6 months of unemployment. And so I've kind of walked that path, and I said, I'm gonna be more prepared next time in case if something happens. And that's what it's all about. It's all about preparation. Martial arts is about preparation. Being financially successful is really more about preparation than it is about how much you make, because if you're doing things right and you're making the right decisions and you're preparing yourself for down times, that can actually be an opportunity for you. So I'm just stoked about talking about that kind of stuff. I love to try to help people see things from a different point of view and maybe make some changes that'll be positive the next time. And who knows what's going to happen in 6 months or a year, but we got to be ready for it. So I hope that what we talk about today will encourage your listeners to take some different steps in their lives.
Heck, I could say that again. And that's really good that you're still alive to tell the tale. And heck, it even probably allows you to really prove your teachings even more now than ever.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if people if they were following the belting system of the financial black belt, by the time they get to purple belt, they have no commercial debt, no debt like credit card debt and student loan debt and stuff like that. But they also have a huge emergency fund. And that emergency fund can literally stretch for 2 years because our tier 3 emergency fund is all based upon 1 year of your annual salary. So if you take your annual salary and realize that your living expenses are your annual salary minus your taxes, minus your other things like that, you could stretch that annual salary for 2 years easily, in the face of what we're facing these days.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah, indeed. My goodness, like 6 months of unemployment too. Like, and it's just one of millions of people who've went through that. So, my goodness, like how was that like? Like, was it like an initial shock? Did you see it coming as a response to the darn COVID nonsense that hit the whole darn globe, or how are you able
But,
to really adapt from that?
so there's a couple things that I have to say that, if you're preparing in the midst of a trial like we've been through, it's hard to think about preparing when you're just thinking about surviving, right? So the key
Yep.
is preparation is always done beforehand. It's a proactive movement. So to have an emergency fund and to see some things coming, like it was in December, I started recognizing that there was a stock market bubble. Now, hopefully a lot of your listeners have taken advantage of any kind of like 401ks or any kind of investment opportunities that they've had. But I saw a bubble coming. I didn't know what was going to pop it, but I knew something was going to pop that bubble. And so I started moving a lot of stuff to cash. In my 401k, I started getting out of my mutual funds and moving straight to cash, because I figured that when that bubble pops, I want to have enough cash on the sidelines that I can then start capitalizing on all these stocks that were going to go on sale. And that's what happened in March. The bubble popped, COVID came in, the bubble popped. The 23rd of March was like the worst day for the market. It was the lowest day of the market, but it was the greatest opportunity for anybody who was sitting on cash. And you could literally start, like, if you sold out of the mutual funds in December and January, when the bubble popped, those things went down so much that you could just step back in and buy twice as many shares for the money that you had in it. So it's being in touch with what's going on, either from a economic point of view, a political point of view, a global point of view. All these different things will impact the market. And if you're reading those correctly and you're preparing, you can make some moves ahead of time. And if you take money and you put it into cash and you're wrong, you really haven't lost anything. But if you don't move money into cash before something like this happens, and it happens, you've lost a lot. And it takes a lot to build yourself back from that. So preparation is what gets you through the tough times, and preparation has to happen before the tough times hit. So this is a great opportunity coming out of something like this for people to step up and say, you know what, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to get on this financial self-defense concept, and I'm going to start earning my belts, and I'm going to start working my way to prepare for the next event that will happen. And I almost guarantee another event will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, you can say that again. It's like a new year hit and then boom, like
Yeah.
that's some craziness happened on the first full week of the year. Like, oh, alrighty. So how's that 2022 looking?
Yeah, that's right. Let's just wish our life away, right? And go to the next. Crazy.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But it's really good though, because I like the fact that you mentioned like preparation is a proactive thing. Like we have to really be proactive at it and really not only be proactive, but also just be optimistic too about it and really just knowing that you're preparing for that rainy day and to be able to take that action ahead of time that you did in December, I believe, of 2019, right? And then,
Yeah,
of course,
2019. Yeah. That's when I recognized the bubble, and it's just, it's not. Yeah, I mean, preparation. That's the word that I keep coming back to. Is if you prepare for tough times, you're going to be fine. You'll do okay, and you'll be able to encourage others through it. And looking back over the past year, there's some times where some of the things that we're going to talk about, it's like, wow, that's like so appropriate if you think of the terms of what we've just gone through. And who knows what's going to happen in, like I say, the next 6 months. I mean, we've already learned one thing about this year: you can't predict what's going to happen, but you can prepare. And so that's kind of my message: is just get prepared.
amen, indeed. So, what do you think might be the first step that folks can take if they finally got themselves out of that darn consumer debt that can build on like a giant Loch Ness monster. And they're like, okay, I finally got past the monster. And the student loans like, oh, good, they're gone. It's like, all right, so what do you think might be the next step folks should definitely take in terms of after getting out of that darn debt monster?
Well, that's kind of the whole belt structure, right? So we start off at the white belt. You're basically getting certain financial things in order. You're starting to learn about the concepts of the whole belt structure. Orange belt, we're going to set up our budget, and it's not really a budget. It's more of what I call a priority system. It's a income distribution strategy. You're deciding how you're going to prioritize your income. Then we move into getting your first emergency fund, and then we pay off the consumer debt. Then we build up that emergency fund over the course of the next two belts. And so that's really the thing is getting to that point, right, where you have no consumer debt and you have what I call a tier 3 emergency fund, which is 1 year of gross salary. Once you're there, that's your defensive structure, right? That's where you learn all the techniques about how to defend against a financial threat. The next thing you do is you start moving into your offensive moves, where you start to learn about investing, and not just a 401k. I'm talking about a brokerage account, where you actually get in and you start learning how to trade stocks and do your own things, and how to understand the market and how the market interacts, and what I call the emotions of the market. Because the greatest opportunity that ever presents itself in the market is fear. When others are fearful, that's when you have to be aggressive. And when others are really aggressive, that's when you have to start being fearful and kind of pull back a little bit. So you understand that you're thinking opposite of what the market's doing. And so if you're out of consumer debt, the next step is build up that emergency fund, get that buffer between you and life. And then once you've built up that emergency fund, then you're going to get into that, hey, let's start making my money work for me, right? And eventually you're going to get to that pentacle point where your money makes more for you than you make for you. And that's a sweet spot to be, because in the midst of a downturn, your money's already working hard for you. And so if you end up in this position of being unemployed, your money's still working for you, because you've now grown to know how to do this. And, I can understand people think that it's too difficult to learn. It's actually a lot of common sense. And it's also learning how to control your emotions, because it's easy to get caught up in the fear of the market or the exuberance of the market and kind of lose perspective. So have a strategy, have some guardrail rules. Those are the rules that, it won't stop you from crashing, but it keeps you from going over the cliff. So those are the kind of things that you want to do. And, that's the next step. Build up the emergency fund and then start learning how to invest your own money and get it working for you.
Amen to that. I like what you said there about guardrail rules, because I never heard that before. And I like that wonderful analogy because it just puts the picture in your mind. It's like, all right, there's the guardrail. Don't do nothing stupid. Don't drive into it. Don't do it like that. We're trying to stay on the road here.
Yeah. I mean, it saves you. It's something as simple as saying, like, for instance, one of the areas that I teach a lot about, I offer, coaching on this, is how to understand the options market. And with options, it's a lot to go into in a short amount of time, but basically it's an opportunity to take advantage of the growth of a stock without having to actually own the stock. And you have to have guardrail rules, because it's so easy to lose perspective. When you're on an icy road, you kind of appreciate the fact that there's something that's going to stop you from going off the road. And that guardrail will do that. It'll protect you. So one of the guardrail rules I have is only a certain percentage of my cash can be allocated to cover my options plays. And that's just a rule that I have set up that says when I get close to that amount, I stop and say, that's it. I can't buy any more this month. I have to kind of sit back and wait for the options to play out. So it's just something that is a protection. And once again, preparation. I'm preparing by putting up this guardrail, and I'm going to make sure that I don't go off the road in this process.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And that's probably another reason why I love the name of the system, the whole financial black belt system, because it borrows the martial arts principles and transfers it to your whole life and heck, even your finances being part of it, because that takes major discipline.
It does. It does. Both becoming a black belt in martial arts definitely requires a lot of discipline. Let me tell you something. When I was working up to my black belt, one of the things that it took 4 years. So first of all, it takes time, right? So don't get in there and think that, oh, I got to be financially solvent in 1 year. It's not going to work that way. It takes amount of time. You also learn different techniques at different belt levels, and you don't go to the next belt level until you've learned the technique proficiently at the belt level in which you are working. And that's the same concept with finance. Don't get ahead of yourself, right? Don't try to be a black belt when you're a white belt. It's not going to work that way, and you're going to find that you're going to burn yourself out. So it took 4 years. I also had to overcome some certain injuries that I received in the process. Right now, I'm 56 years old, so it's hard for a person my age to do some of the stuff that I had to do in order to earn my black belt. But the point is that you have to overcome injuries. In finance, you know what? You're going to have to overcome these downturns, but you can't quit. You got to keep going. You got to keep showing up. The only way to earn a black belt is to show up to the next class. And you got to keep doing that. So it's the same way with finance. In order to get to the financial black belt, you have to keep showing up for the next lesson. You have to keep going. You can't quit.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can't quit indeed. There's no quitting allowed because more lessons await. More lessons await. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
indeed. And I hear
Yep.
last year actually taught you quite a few lessons, if I'm not mistaken, 5 of them, right?
Yeah. So I got 5 little bits of wisdom that, every one of them is a word picture. And every one of them paints a different way of looking at what we've just been through, and hopefully will change perspective on how to move forward and understand how to overcome some challenges that some other people might have in life outside of COVID, outside of the chaos and the craziness that's going on right now. So I tell you what, why don't I start by just giving you the 5, and then we'll unpack them a little bit and try to have a little conversation on kind of what it means, what these 5 nuggets of wisdom mean. So first one is, you cannot produce gold without digging below the surface. Number 2, every pearl begins as a grain of sand. Number 3, every piece of coal has the potential to become a diamond. Number 4, the same rain that washes away the soil in the summer provides a blanket of snow to insulate the soil in the winter. And the 5th one is, the same wind that lifts the aircraft slows down its approach.
Mm.
So, shall we unpack them?
Man, go on ahead, man. Christmas season here now, baby.
All right, so you can't produce gold without digging below the surface. When I was out in South Dakota, I visited a gold mine, and one of the most interesting facts that jumped out to me was that at the 600 or 700 foot level, it was 60 some degrees in the ground. But the deeper you went, because they kept having to follow the gold ore, they had to keep following it down. They got down to the 10,000 foot level. And at the 10,000 foot level, first of all, you have to pump in oxygen, and you have to pump in air conditioning, because at the 10,000 foot level, under the earth, it's about 140 degrees. And that was amazing to me, because what it really tells us is that the deeper you go, the hotter it gets. You're getting closer to the core of the earth. And so in order to work in that environment, you have to pump in fresh air and air conditioning. So, as I thought about that, I'm like, that's a lot. When we start getting deep in problems, we need people around us that are going to pump oxygen in and pump in air conditioning and try to cool us. But it also tells me that in order to find the gold, in this case, you have to find the gold ore, you have to dig below the surface. So when times get tough, when the heat gets on, we have to dig deep within ourselves and find that breath of fresh air. We have to find that conditioning, that air conditioning that can cool down some of the heat that we're facing. And it doesn't change. Once the rock gets up to the surface, you still have to crush it and process it and extract the gold out of it. So if you want gold, if you want to make something gold in your life, if you want to produce something of value, we have to dig deep, and we have to find those resources within us that are innately put in us. And we have to turn our challenges and our those situations that we find ourselves in, we have to turn those in to a valuable metal that other people are going to look and go, wow, I want that. So that's where that one is.
Oh man, oh man. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's freaking solid. And so, Drew, it's like as soon as you get close to the core of the earth, it's like, oh man, it gets heated. And it's like, hey, you got to make sure you have the right equipment as you go along. So, freaking love that one, man. Love it.
Yep. So number 2, every pearl begins as a grain of sand. And we could say this another way, okay? At the center of every pearl is an irritant. So what happens to the oyster is it gets a piece of sand or a microorganism within it, and it is irritated. So it starts producing this chemical that starts to coat that piece of sand. And slowly but surely it turns into a pearl. And the reason why the pearls keep getting bigger is because it keeps coating it, because now the pearl has become the irritant, right? But it's also become the very valuable thing that people treasure. People pay a lot of money for pearls. And if we can keep in mind, I mean, this past year has got to be an irritant for most people. I don't know too many people that haven't been irritated by something that's gone on this year. But instead of sitting there and being irritated, we need to kind of produce that chemical within us that will start to coat that irritant and turn it into something valuable that, once again, other people are going to say, hey, I want that. I want what that person has. So we have to learn that life is always going to give us irritants, always. And we need to figure out a way to coat it, to take away the irritation within our own lives, but translate it into something that becomes of value for others. And that's number 2.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's like, hey, it's like masks. This thing is irritant, but hey, like it's protecting my life here.
That's right. Yeah. It really comes down to it's how you react to the irritant, right? That determines the value of your pearl. You can let it continue to be an irritant, and nobody's going to look at you and say, wow, I want what that person has, because that person's nothing but irritated all the time. And there's many ways to do this, but really it comes down to, once again, what is innate within ourselves that we can say, hey, you know what, I'm going to try to think about this differently to change what's irritating me into something that can be of value for other people. It's a mindset, right? It's changing your mindset into something that's going to become valuable. Which leads me on to number 3, because number 3 is once again about something valuable. Every piece of coal has the potential to become a diamond. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this goes all the way back actually to your birth. It goes back to your birth, goes back to my birth, goes back to everybody's birth. Life has a way of putting carbon in everybody's existence. You don't ask what family to be born into. You don't ask what part of the country you're going to be born. You don't, there's nothing we can do to select these things, but they can become something in our life that is not appreciated by us. The things, that we don't, it's just carbon. It's hard to explain it, but it's just carbon. It makes us dirty, right? And what I realized is that these times of pressure, not having a job for 6 months, facing some of the challenges that we've been facing, whether it be social changes or political changes or all these different things, that the stuff that goes on around us, we really don't have a say in that. But we can take that, and through the process of the pressures of the heat that we have in our own lives, we can turn it into a diamond. And so it requires three things, right? First of all, it requires heat. So chances are that if you're going through a difficult time in your life, that's the heat, right? It takes a lot of pressure. There's no doubt that when we struggle, um, you know, 19 years ago, my wife and I were getting ready to have a child, our first child. We're like so stoked. Oh, this is going to be great, you know. And he was born, and there were problems and complications, and we almost lost him in utero. So they had to do an emergency C-section, and he was in the NICU in the hospital for 17 days after his birth, where her and I just went from home to work to hospital to home to work to hospital for 17 days. He finally came home. We realized there's major complications. It has not slowed down since. The stress associated with raising a child with special needs that has intellectual and physical disabilities is difficult, to say the least. It's very stressful, a lot of pressure, a lot of heat, and it's been a long time. And those are the three key elements that it takes to turn a piece of carbon into a diamond, right? It takes heat, it takes pressure, and it takes time. And raising a special needs child, we've had that. And we've become so much better. And the diamond that we got today, I wouldn't trade for having a healthy, normal child 19 years ago, because I have been able to, he's been my inspiration to write books. He's been my inspiration to learn everything I could learn about the stock market so I could prepare for his future, because he's going to need support long beyond my death. All these things have turned into diamonds for me. I haven't been bitter about it. I really have been trying to say, I'm going to take the heat, I'm going to take the pressure, and I'm going to take the time, and I'm going to become the best I can be for him so that he can go on and be the best he can be. So I've turned it into a diamond, and other people can do the same thing. But you've got to be willing to say, you know what? I don't want to escape the heat. I don't want to escape the pressure. I'm okay in it because I know that I'm headed somewhere that's going to be much better and much more valuable than if I didn't have this trial or problem in my life.
Amen to that. And that is so powerful right there. It's like this is only part 3 of the 5, and this one's probably the most powerful yet, because I especially love the little 3 words inside of the main point of just really just the heat, the pressure, and the time, because it's so true. Like, you really need all 3 to have that diamond just emerge fully. Like, it all starts as coal, and we have to
Yeah.
deal with the carbon and everything. So I just love that.
Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes those times in our lives when we struggle the most are the ones that turn out the best diamonds. You know, the clarity and cut is just everything is. It just really turns it into a valuable piece of life for us. So number 4. Now we're going to move a little bit away from being in the earth, and we're going to kind of go on top of the earth and say that the same rain that washes away the soil in the summer provides a blanket of snow that insulates the soil in the winter. Rain has a way, when you get a massive storm, right, it has a way of washing away soil. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it could be bad soil that the rain's washing away. And in the wintertime, believe it or not, the same rains that falls in the wintertime recycles, the old cycle, and it comes back as snow in the winter, right? Rain in the summer, snow in the winter. And the snow that blankets our ground, yes, the grass doesn't grow, but what's happening underneath of that blanket of insulation is the roots are growing deeper. And so whether we're in the season of summer in our lives or in the season of winter, we've got some tough stuff going on. The storm, whether it be a thunderstorm or a snowstorm, they're not bad things, because sometimes that rain, we need it to wash away that bad soil. All of us have some bad soil in our lives for whatever reason. We've been exposed to things that, offended us or hurt us or whatever. Sometimes we need that storm to wash that rain, wash that soil away. And then there's times where we feel isolated or lonely, and especially in the last year. I mean, You can't get together with family. You feel isolated. You might feel lonely. And it's a cold feeling to us. But while we're taking that time to not be able to see our friends and family face to face and get together and enjoy them, we can let our roots grow deeper. And one of the things that my wife and I have done is we've definitely started studying a little bit more of the good book. We want to try to understand things from a different perspective on a deeper level. And so we're digging our roots deeper while we're in this man-made kind of isolation that we have to be in. And it's important to understand that seasons change, but you don't have to, right? We're all going to go through different seasons. Dom, you're at a different season right now in your life than I am in mine, and I'm in a different season than my neighbor. And so we eventually go through all of our seasons, right? And we have storms in all those different seasons. We don't. The winter doesn't bring about nice, peaceful, calm weather. The winter is going to bring blizzards or whatever. So seasons change, but you don't have to. You can let the bad soil get washed away, and you can grow your roots deeper when the winter hits.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Gotta love the seasons of life. Definitely gotta love the seasons of life. Heck, even with the wonderful snow keeping that soil insulated, because hey, the soil needs the break.
Yeah, it does. It does.
And heck, that probably goes with us, like remind ourselves to take necessary breaks too.
Yeah, that's a really great point. That's a really great point. We can look at this time of isolation as an opportunity to take a break, maybe get some things worked out, not only in our head, but in our hearts, right? And certainly in our finances. After what we've gone through, certainly in our finances, we can figure something out. Now is a great time for somebody to say, you know what, it's been tough. I'm going to come back from this, first of all, right? I am going to come back from this. It's a positive attitude. And second of all, when I come back from this, I'm going to do things differently so I can be prepared for the next time. So I think that's important. Definitely important. Let me wrap up with number 5. The same wind that lifts the aircraft slows down its approach. Now, this is a phenomenon. When I was younger, my dad was an air traffic controller, and he would take us out to the airport, and he'd let us watch the planes take off and land. And I always found it kind of interesting that the planes were always taking off in one direction and they were landing in that same direction. And I thought it was just because of the runways. Well, you leave the north side of the runway and you fly out the south side of the runway. And when you come in the north side and you stop at the south side, right? So the planes were never going to come over top of each other. But the reason why they do that is because in order for an aircraft to get lift, it needs 2 things. It needs to have thrust. That's a good way to put it, right? It needs to have thrust, something that's going to force it to go forward. And that's what the engines do. Creates thrust. But it also needs lift. And the way it gets its lift is from the wind. If it flies with the wind isn't out in front of the aircraft, so it doesn't have the ability to lift the aircraft. So it has to fly into the headwind in order for that wind to get underneath the wings and actually lift the aircraft. So, this past season that we've just been through might have taken the thrust out of some people's lives. They feel like they don't have that thrust. We need to get that back. Some way we need to figure out, we need to find that thing in our lives that gives us thrust, that drive, that motivator, that passion that we have that will give us the thrust in our life to take off. And then we have to realize that once we have that thrust, we have to fly into the headwind. If we don't fly into the headwind, we are not going to get the kind of lift we need in order to take off. Now, ironically, when you're coming in for a landing, you want that headwind because as you come in, you have to slow down your engines. You have to take some of the thrust off in order to get the plane to start settling back down to the earth. And in order to do that, but in order to keep the plane up long enough, because obviously you're slowing down its speed, which means that gravity is going to take over and it's going to start pulling it down to the earth. It needs to have a headwind to continue to create that lift so it can make it to the runway. So the same wind, it's the same headwind. It can lift you or it can bring you in on a nice, safe landing, depending on where you are in life, right? For those who are taking off, that coming out of college, or maybe are young in their career, or they recently lost a job and they're going to have to be starting a new job. The two things you can't give up is you can't give up your thrust. You got to keep driving forward, and you got to be willing to steer into the headwind, because that's what's going to give you your lift. For those who are getting close to retirement, the idea is you still want that headwind, because that headwind is going to stop you from going too fast. You're going too fast, you make bad decisions. You make bad decisions, you end up having economic calamities, and you might retire without the kind of resources that you need. So by slowing down your approach into that season of life in which you're entering, that headwind is going to pay dividends, because it's going to keep you up until you can safely put your wheels down on the runway. So that's the 5 nuggets of wisdom that I've kind of thought about over these past 12 months. And hopefully going forward, people can find some of these within their own life. And it will give them some extra motivation to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to pick myself back up. I'm going to head into the headwind. I'm not going to be afraid of the storms, heat, pressure, time, whatever it takes. I want to be something valuable. This little thing that's irritating me in my life, I'm not going to let it irritate me. I'm going to make it into a pearl. And you know what? I'm willing to dig deep in order to find the gold.
Oh, yeah, baby. That's right. The Special K himself, Ken, baby, dropping them jewels, them pearls, and the gold bars, baby. That's right. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Found the whole treasure trove in all these magical nuggets, indeed. Yes, indeed. My goodness. Love it. Love it right there, indeed. So, my goodness. So, with all this magical wisdom, is there anything that you wish you may have done differently, like 2 or 3 things you may have wished you have done differently over the past year from all these lessons that you've acquired?
Yeah. I mean, if I really thought about it, I think the thing that made it the hardest was paying attention to the noise. There was a lot of noise out there. There still is a lot of noise out there. Um, you know, when I get caught up in listening to the noise instead of listening to my own heart or my own reasoning or my own thought process, it's easy to become down, right? It's easy to become a negative kind of person that's thinking, oh, this just isn't going to be good. I guess that's one of the things, is to stop listening to the noise. Find those who are succeeding at the things that you want to succeed, and learn what they're doing, right? So if you've gone through a time of self-doubt, find somebody who has that confidence, or do what I did. I had a lot of self-doubt 45 years ago, and I knew that I needed something. And I'm the kind of person that likes to be around other people and doing what other people are doing, not necessarily following the crowd, but I like to be around people who are doing positive things. And what I realized was, because of the stress of having, raising a special needs child and having to deal with all the medical issues, and my son had just come through his 11th surgery, I realized I was literally eating myself to death, right? I was up to 300 pounds, and I realized, if I'm going to be around for my son, I've got to get healthy. So I got to find something to kind of get out of this negative mindset of my life is so terrible because of all of the stress, and do something positive that was not only going to, give me a better outlook on life, but was also going to give my son the opportunity to have a father, and to have a father who was going to be productive and provide for him beyond, for the many years that he's going to need it. So that's when I went down. I signed back up for martial arts. Now, I'd done it back in the 90s, but I went down, I signed back up for the martial arts, and I started training. It was not my goal to become a black belt. My goal was just to get some discipline back in my life. And over that course of time, I lost 80 pounds, earned my black belt. 4 years later, I'm in a much better place mentally. I've got a better perspective. But what I realized is, over the last year, I was listening to the noise again of all the craziness that's out there. And I somewhat lost focus, and I started feeling really, really down about it. And I actually gained back 30 pounds. And so I just kicked it into gear at the first of the year. And I said, you know what? Never again. I'm not doing this again. So I'm amping up. I'm instead of going 2 nights a week, I'm actually going 3 or 4 nights a week to martial arts now. I'm amping it back up, and I'm trying to get that perspective back that says, no, 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 I'm not going back down that road. And it all came from listening to the noise. So I've actually stopped listening to the noise again. I'm just like, fine. I've got my thing. I'm going to do my thing, and I'll help anybody who I can help. But most importantly, I'll help my son, and I'll help my son by being here and being disciplined for him.
Amen, indeed. Amen. My goodness. I love the fact that you're able to kick yourself back into gear. And I love that advice of just making sure when you're listening to the noise, realize, you know what, let me turn down the noise and get back within myself and those that I truly love and care about. Make sure that I'm in my peak performance state so I can be around for those I care about. So kudos to you, Ken, and I hope you keep it up. There might even be another black belt in the future, maybe.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was just having that discussion with Master Baruki, and basically, it's possible this year to make the second degree. From a financial point of view, we're second degree financial black belts, and we're going to be probably being promoted to third degree financial black belts this year. So things are, going great. Things are really going great. I can't complain. The Lord's been very, very. How can you say loyal? Very loyal, and helping us through some of the struggles that we've had, whether it be from an emotional point of view with all the craziness and the isolation, to just staying on track and being blessed. I mean, that's the best thing about it. So I think things are good, and I would love to help people. Obviously the financial black belt book is out there. Somebody can go to Amazon and they can order it. I'm actually, my goal this year is to finish 2 books. So I did do the financial self-defense book, and now I'm going to do what's called the black belt, which is just focused on investing and strategy and things that deal with once you get your first degree financial black belt, you can get your second, third, and fourth by just doing these strategies and learning and getting deeper into how to build wealth. That's really what the black belts are all about. And then I'm also working on another book that's kind of a sequel. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called God, I Was Wondering, which is about, I basically asked atheists and agnostics to assume that God existed and that you were actually able to meet him and ask him a question. What would you ask him? And so people actually responded back with, I think I had like 40 questions or something to that number. And so I prayed about each one and answered the questions with biblical support. It's not a doctrinal book, because what it is it's saying, hey, this is a possible logical explanation that God may give if you're looking for a logical explanation, but it's supported by the Bible. And I kind of did that same process again, and now I've got 30 some more questions, and I'm going to do God, I Was Wondering too. So those are my 2 goals, is to finish the black belts and to finish God, I Was Wondering too, and hopefully have them published, if not very late this year, early next year.
Sweet. Well, looking forward to that indeed. Because folks are going to need both of them. It's like, hey, you got to levitate financially in the air, doing tornado kicks with the wealth, and also got to also got to make sure that, hey, this may not be the answer you think you're looking for, but hey, at least here's an answer for you to make sure you at least get in perspective and heck, maybe even change your life for the better.
Yeah, exactly. And if you get an agnostic that doesn't quite sure know, and they read some of these questions, and what the fascinating thing about that book, God, I Was Wondering, is that the questions that atheists and agnostics ask, I've heard Christians ask the exact same questions. The difference I think is where they're asking from, right? So like an atheist might ask to kind of be antagonistic, whereas a Christian may ask because they really want to know, right? But you can give the answer. The answer is the same, right? It's the same question, it's the same answer, And if you can take somebody who is agnostic and say, hey, you know what, this is actually possible. Let me look into this more. In fact, it's like a conversation starter. So, if you have somebody in your audience, somebody in your listeners who's saying, I know somebody that's kind of on the fence, this might be the kind of book that will give them some answers that person could then maybe make a shift in thinking and say, hey, I want to look into God's word a little bit more because I think this is something I want to learn more about. So it's a good conversation starter. Atheists who are diehard atheists, first of all, there's no such thing as an atheist, right? Because an atheist claims that they know that there's no God, and you'd have to have all knowledge in order to know that there's no God. So since we don't have all knowledge, you can't know it. So you can't really be an atheist. But that's another conversation. But it's a good conversation starter for those who may be either questioning their faith or, looking or seeking. It's a good way to kind of get the Bible introduced to them, to somebody, and then kind of work from there. And certainly, the Financial Black Belts Academy's Financial Self-Defense Training Guide will get you started, and we'll move you from living paycheck to paycheck to becoming financially stable, to becoming financially secure, to becoming what I call a prodigious accumulator of wealth. Somebody who is just able to build a great amount of wealth regardless of their income, and then start to be charitable with it.
Amen to that. Amen to that. That's right. Secret to living is giving indeed. And folks, you can start giving now, but heck, you can give even more once you get to that higher level. That's right. You'll have those 8-pack abs of wealth to be able to share with the rest of the world.
That's silly, man. That's good. I like it.
Hey, I aim to please, and for folks who want to get financially fit and get that financial black belt and keep in contact with all the wonderful stuff you're doing, Ken, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
So my website is financialblackbelt.us. And certainly, anybody who goes there and makes a comment, fills out the comment form, it'll send an email directly to me. I'll respond. That's the best way. The links for the books are out there. So certainly somebody can go out there. You can just go onto Amazon and type in Kenneth E. Rupert, and it's going to come up. You can. Now there's some books that are credited to me that aren't mine. It's kind of interesting. You type in my name, and these tax books come up, and I'm like, I've never written a tax book in my life, but for some reason they show up underneath my name. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, but you'll see them. They're out there. If the book is an encouragement, then it's done its job, right? It doesn't have to change your life, but if it gives you some encouragement to think differently, that's what this is about. Get rid of the noise. Get the noise out of your head. Get the noise from the world out of your mind, and focus on what you need to do to bring forth that out of your life that can be valuable to others.
Woohoo! Well, there you have it, folks. Going off to Amazon. Check the show notes too. His site's definitely going to be on the show notes on the website, and check out all that Ken's doing and all that's to come, because my man Ken stays proactive and he loves to take action, especially positive action, to help others become better and not butter. So definitely check him out, folks. So any closing thoughts before we close up shop, Ken?
Well, Don, it's been a pleasure, first of all, talking to you. I don't think I've talked to you. It's been a while. And, it's always a good time to get together and share my thoughts with you and just get your feedback. I love it. I hope your listeners will find whatever we've talked about to be positive and uplifting. And I definitely want to give you exclusive rights that when I get my books out there, I'll ring you back up, and maybe we can go in and talk about those in detail.
This is your host, Don Brightman. Hope you enjoyed what you just heard. And if you really did, do me a solid and leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever you're listening to. And subscribe to hear more, because more is coming your way to advance you further than before.